We do want to share some breaking news with you now. Convicted serial killer Jeremy Skibicki has been sentenced to 4 life sentences for murdering 4 Indigenous women. During the course of the trial happening in Winnipeg, the court heard how Skibicki preyed on the vulnerable women at homeless shelters, inviting them back to his apartment where they were abused and then killed. Now, earlier today, the court heard victim impact statements from family and friends of those women. The leader of a First Nations advocacy group addressed the court, saying Skibicki's actions have left deep scars that will be felt for generations. Let's go to defense lawyer Monte MacGregor. He joins us now to talk some more about this. Monte, 4 convictions on murder, 4 life sentences, that is expected, but what does that actually mean for him?
Well, so it's important that it's 4. They'll run concurrently because you only have 1 life, of course. But if, for example, he were to, and I don't see that happening in this case, but if he were to successfully appeal one of them, then it would still leave the others remaining. There's a case in Ontario, the Pan case, where the murder convictions were overturned, but the attempted murder conviction remains. So it's important that they're identified individually, but practically it makes no real difference in the end. It means that Mr. Skibicki will serve likely the remainder of his life in jail. He will be entitled to ask to be released 25 years after the day of his arrest. However, given the nature of the offenses and given the likely psychiatric assessments that he'll undertake, I don't presume that he will be released at any time soon, and maybe never.
Of course, he has not pled guilty at any point. They had a different defense. I'm wondering what fault you saw in their defense, if you did see fault.
Well, often cases are, you try to do, usually you run a prosecution in 2 stages. Can they first prove that you're the person that commits the act or your identity? And if so, then is there a legal justification for the act, duress, self-defense, intoxication? And here you have 4 individual attacks. So the defense was really up against the wall, frankly. It seemed like the identity of him as the perpetrator was somewhat overwhelming. And then the only thing left would be to try and explain how you could engage in this type of act. And that calls into question his mental health and what's known as not criminally responsible. In Canada, that's where you have an underlying psychiatric condition that's active at the time that you commit the offense, and that it causes you to fail to appreciate sort of the nature and consequences of your act. Lots of individuals have been left with this as being effectively their only defense, Morella, because there is no justification for this horrific attack on these 4 individual women that he targeted. And so they made efforts to try and attach it to a mental health condition, and the court saw past that relatively quickly. And I can easily see that, Morella, frankly, because, if he targeted individuals, he sort of led them to their trap, if he took advantage of them in the difficult and heinous ways that he did, and then made efforts to conceal his actions, that speaks to somebody that knows about the nature and the consequences of what they're doing, both morally and legally, trying to evade police to continue what he was doing. So I, from the outset, didn't believe that the defense had much merit. However, sometimes as a defense lawyer, that's all you're left with.
So the argument they had made, I believe, was that he was schizophrenic. And what you're saying is that when you watched that evidence be presented in court, it was clear that the crimes happened over a longer period of time. This wasn't some sort of spontaneous act. For example, as you mentioned, he would go to these homeless shelters and he would basically stalk or wait around for women who he then took home.
That's it exactly. And if you're looking at someone that's engaging, because it's a very high threshold to get over on that defense, because often, American TV and movies make it difficult to have an actual appreciation of the law and how it actually works, because often there they say, the insanity defense, and that's what they rely on. But you've sort of hit the nail on the head. If someone's engaging in this methodical plan to trap individuals, to abuse them, and then to dispose of the body, and then does it on a consistent basis again and again, with over such a great period of time, it really takes away from sort of the quick actions of somebody that's completely unaware of what they're doing. So, as I said, the defense not left with much, and that happens in cases. So you try to do the best you can to defend them, and here, thankfully, it wasn't accepted.
Yeah, I just want to remind viewers that the physical evidence did seem to be, as you mentioned, quite overwhelming, because there was a videotape, I guess, from some of the shelters. Outside of the shelters, there were there was other physical evidence that led you back here to Skibicki.
That's right. If the identification is made, I mean, you can just think of scenarios where if somebody shoots someone 5 or 6 times and they find the gun and they have them on video doing it, then that identity is made. And as a defense lawyer, once you satisfy that in your mind and you're running your case, then you have to say, okay, well, is there any legal justification outside of that's available to present? And if it's going to be not criminally responsible, then you're going to need an expert to attach to somebody. And it's important, Morella, that like psychopathy or a psychopath or somebody that does this for pleasure, that's not a mental health condition that eliminates their ability to understand and appreciate what's going on. Schizophrenia is often the case because without medication, that individual is acting typically outside of the normal behavior because they don't understand what they're doing.
Thanks for highlighting that point. That is something important to know. Monte MacGregor, good to have you. Thanks for joining us again. Appreciate your time.
Thanks, Morella. Have a good day and thank you.